Chapter 6 continued. For years I had wished I could speak Italian, a language I find more beautiful than roses, but I could never make the practical justification for studying it. Why not just bone up on the French or Russian I'd already studied years ago? Or learn to speak Spanish, the better to help me communicate with millions of my fellow Americans? What was I going to do with Italian? It's not like I was going to move there. It would be more practical to learn how to play the accordion. But why must everything always have a practical application? I'd been such a diligent soldier for years, working, producing, never missing a deadline, taking care of my loved ones, my gums, and my credit record, voting, etc. Is this lifetime supposed to be only about duty? In this dark period of loss, did I need any justification for learning Italian other than it was the only thing I could imagine bringing me any pleasure right now? And it wasn't that outrageous a goal anyway to want to study a language. It's not like I was saying at age 32, I want to become the principal ballerina for the New York City Ballet. Studying a language is something you can actually do, so I signed up for classes at one of those continuing education places, otherwise known as night school for divorced ladies. My friends thought this was hilarious. My friend Nick asked, "Why are you studying Italian?" So that just in case Italy ever invades Ethiopia again and is actually successful this time, you can brag about knowing a language that's spoken in 2 whole countries. But I loved it. Every word was a singing sparrow, a magic trick, a truffle for me. I would slosh home through the rain after class, draw a hot bath, and lie there in the bubbles, reading the Italian dictionary aloud to myself, taking my mind off my divorce pressures and my heartache. The words made me laugh and delight. I started referring to my cell phone as Il mio telefonino, in parentheses, my teensy little telephone. I became one of those annoying people who always say ciao, only I was extra annoying since I would always explain where the word ciao comes from, parentheses, if you must know. It's an abbreviation of a phrase used by medieval Venetians as an intimate salutation, sono il suo schiavo, meaning I am your slave, close parentheses. Just speaking these words made me feel sexy and happy. My divorce lawyer told me not to worry. She said she had one client, Korean by heritage, who, after a yucky divorce, legally changed her name to something Italian just to feel sexy and happy again. Maybe I would move to Italy after all. Chapter 7. The other notable thing that was happening during that time was the newfound adventure of spiritual discipline. Aided and abetted, of course, by the introduction into my life of an actual living Indian guru, for whom I will always have David to thank. I'd been introduced to my guru the first night I ever went to David's apartment. Kind of fell in love with them both at the same time. I walked into David's apartment and saw this picture on his dresser of a radiantly beautiful Indian woman, and I asked, "Who's that?" He said, "That is my spiritual teacher." My heart skipped a beat and then flat out tripped over itself and fell on its face. Then my heart stood up, brushed itself off, took a deep breath, and announced, "I want a spiritual teacher." I literally mean that it was my heart who said this, speaking through my mouth. I felt this weird division in myself, and my mind stepped out of my body for a moment, spun around to face my heart in astonishment, and silently asked, "You do?" "Yes," replied my heart, "I do." Then my mind asked my heart, a tad sarcastically, "Since when?" But I already knew the answer since that night on the bathroom floor. My gosh, but I wanted a spiritual teacher. I immediately began constructing a fantasy of what it would be like to have one. I imagined that this radiantly beautiful Indian woman would come to my apartment a few evenings a week, and we would sit and drink tea and talk about divinity, and she would give me reading assignments and explain the significance of the strange sensations I was feeling during meditation. All this fantasy was quickly swept away when David told me about the international status of this woman, about her tens of thousands of students, many of whom have never met her face to face. Still, he said, there was a gathering here in New York City every Tuesday night of the Guru's devotees who came together as a group to meditate and chant. David said, if you're not too freaked out by the idea of being in a room with several hundred people chanting God's name in Sanskrit, you can come sometime. I joined him the following Tuesday night. Far from being freaked out by these regular-looking people singing to God, I instead felt my soul rise diaphanous in the wake of that chanting. I walked home that night feeling like the air could move through me, like I was clean linen fluttering on a clothesline. Like New York itself had become a city made of rice paper, and I was light enough to run across every rooftop. I started going to the chants every Tuesday. Then I started meditating every morning on the ancient Sanskrit mantra the Guru gives to all her students, parentheses, the regal Om Namah Shivaya, meaning I honor the divinity that resides within me. Then I listened to the Guru speak in person for the first time, and her words gave me chill bumps over my whole body, even across the skin of my face. And when I heard she had an ashram in India, I knew I must take myself there as quickly as possible. Chapter 8. In the meantime, though, I had to go on this trip to Indonesia, which happened again because of a magazine assignment. Just when I was feeling particularly sorry for myself for being broke and lonely and caged up in divorce internment camp, an editor from a women's magazine asked if she could pay to send me to Bali to write a story about yoga vacations. In return, I asked her a series of questions, mostly along the line of, is a bean green and does James Brown get down? When I got to Bali, which is, to be brief, a very nice place, a teacher who was running the yoga retreat asked us, while you're all here, is there anybody who would like to go visit a 9th-generation Balinese medicine man? Another question too obvious to even answer. And so we all went over to his house one night. The medicine man, as it turned out, was a small, merry-eyed, russet-colored old guy with a mostly toothless mouth, whose resemblance in every way to the Star Wars character Yoda cannot be exaggerated. His name was cont'd, Liyer, Ketut. He spoke a scattered and thoroughly entertaining kind of English, but there was a translator available for when he got stuck on a word. Our yoga teacher had told us in advance that we could each bring one question or problem to the medicine man, and he would try to help us with our troubles. I had been thinking for days of what to ask him. My initial ideas were so lame. Will you make my husband give me a divorce? Will you make David be sexually attracted to me again? I was rightly ashamed of myself for these thoughts. Who travels all the way around the world to meet an ancient medicine man in Indonesia only to ask him to intercede in boy trouble? So when the old man asked me in person what I really wanted, I found other, truer words. I want to have a lasting experience of God, I told him. Sometimes I feel like I understand the divinity of this world, but then I lose it because I get distracted by my petty desires and fears. I want to be with God all the time, but I don't want to be a monk or totally give up worldly pleasures. I guess what I want to learn is how to live in this world and enjoy its delights, but also devote myself to God. Ketut said he could answer my question with a picture. He showed me a sketch he'd drawn once during meditation. It was an androgynous human figure, standing up, hands clasped in prayer. But this figure had 4 legs and no head. Where the head should have been, there was only a wild foliage of ferns and flowers. There was a small, smiling face drawn over the heart. To find the balance you want, Ketut spoke through his translator, this is what you must become. You must keep your feet grounded so firmly on the earth that it's like you have 4 legs instead of 2. That way you can stay in the world. But you must stop looking at the world through your head. You must look through your heart instead. That way you will know God. Then he asked if he could read my palm. I gave him my left hand, and he proceeded to put me together like a 3-piece puzzle. You're a world traveler, he began, which I thought was maybe a little obvious given that I was in Indonesia at the moment, but I didn't force the point. You have more good luck than anyone I've ever met. You will live a long time, have many friends, many experiences. You will see the whole world. You only have one problem in your life. You worry too much. Always you get too emotional, too nervous. If I promise you that you will never have any reason in your life to ever worry about anything, will you believe me? Nervously I nodded, not believing him. For work you do something creative, maybe like an artist, and you get paid good money for it. Always you will get paid good money for this thing you do. You are generous with money, maybe too generous. Also one problem, you will lose all your money once in your life. I think maybe it will happen soon. I think maybe it will happen in the next 6 to 10 months, I said, thinking about my divorce. Ketut nodded as if to say, yeah, that sounds about right. But don't worry, he said, after you lose all your money, you will get it all right back again. Right away you'll be fine. You will have 2 marriages in your life, one short, one long, and you will have 2 children. I waited for him to say one short, one long, but he was suddenly silent, frowning at my palm. Then he said, strange, which is something you never want to hear from either your palm reader or your dentist. He asked me to move directly under the hanging light bulb so he could take a better look. I am wrong, he announced. You will only have one child, late in life, a daughter, maybe, if you decide. But there is something else. He frowned, then looked up, suddenly absolutely confident. Someday soon you will come back here to Bali. You must. You will stay here in Bali for 3, maybe 4 months. You will be my friend. Maybe you will live here with my family. I can practice English with you. I never had anybody to practice English with. I think you're good with words. I think this creative work you do is something about words, yes? Yes, I said. I'm a writer. I'm a book writer. You are a book writer from New York, he said, in agreement and confirmation. So you will come back here to Bali and live here and teach me English, and I will teach you everything I know. Then he stood up and brushed off his hands like that settled. I said, if you're serious, mister, I'm serious. He beamed at me toothlessly and said, see you later, alligator.